Hey y'all, it's Ashley at Bookish Room, and we are here with day number 17 of Vlogmas. As you can see from the title, we are going to talk about some classics. Yikes, some classics that I want to read in 2021. So I originally was thinking about what other holiday songs to use, and of course we know that the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies is definitely one of the most iconic holiday songs out there, and it is an old song. It's part of the Nutcracker, which is an old ballet. So it was like, older books, I think I could inform this into talking about classics. And this year I definitely did not do that. I have not picked up a classic all year long, and that's just not good. And it's not that I don't like classics at all, I just did not pick up one. And I also did not pick up any seriously translate, well, that's not true, like I read manga, which technically is translated. However, I didn't read anything outside of that in terms of works that have been translated. So I decided that next year I do want to go in reading a little bit more classics and a little bit more translated works. Now, they don't have to be the equivalent of classics, but some of the classics that I have in this list are ones that are translated works, and I do consider to be either like they're classics or they're modern classics. And some of these that I'm going to talk about today are actually rereads. I just haven't read them in a long time, and I want to revisit them because I have enjoyed them, and some of them are going to be newer to me. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the song a little bit first. So the song, of course, is the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. Gosh, I hope I'm getting that right, because guess what? I'm not editing that out. Got that completely wrong. My notes are just a mess. Yeah, just a mess. So yeah, Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. It is the third movement in the Nutcracker pas de deux, which my accent in French is never very good at all. And it's from Act 2 of the 1892 ballet. Usually this is danced by the principal female dancer, and just of course a little bit about the Nutcracker. It is the ballet itself is based on the 1816 fairy tale The Nutcracker and the Mouse King. So this is one that I think a lot of people will be familiar with when you actually hear it, and I thought that it would be great to relate it to classic books. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about these classic books. So like I said before, these are not just your typical classics. Some of these in here would be considered modern classics. So the first one that I have on this list is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, because of the fact that I read a little bit of this year and I have not finished this book yet. And I had a group where we were supposed to be reading it together, but everybody got busy. I got busy. Everyone in the group got busy. So it was good intentions behind it. It was just good intentions behind it. And I appreciate those of you who wanted to jump in and read it. I think some people got pretty far in it, but I definitely got busier than what I anticipated, and I had not been able to sit down and read this. I think that I need to give myself a greater amount of time to read The Count of Monte Cristo instead of trying to finish it in such a shorter period of time, because it is such an intense length, not in terms of accessibility, because I actually find The Count of Monte Cristo to be rather accessible. I like the writing. I think it is the great story of revenge. I mean, come on now, like our main character here is screwed over to the highest level in this book, and parts of it are actually quite funny. I mean, leading up to the ultimate act of revenge that occurs, well, not on Dante's Edmond Dantes's part, but on the villains of the story when they betray him. Some parts of that are kind of humorous. So I definitely think that I need to go back and finish this up. So once again, if you're part of that group, I apologize sincerely. I think that maybe my ambitions of trying to finish this in such a shorter period of time it was just too high, and I need to pull this into next year. The next one that I have here is Grimm's Fairy Tales, of course, SARS. This is written by the Brothers Grimm, and these are the original source materials for a lot of fairy tales that we all know, and a lot of fairy tales that I am just familiar with, especially in reading like Fables by Bill Willingham. And I think that I wanted to read this because I felt like we take these fairy tales and we make them for kids, and we make them accessible in a way that they're not as scary, and they're not as strange. But these were not intended for children at first. I believe that it was their goal to preserve Germanic folklore and to tell about the hardships of peasants. And then I think once they got popular, they started to soften some of their stories for children when they saw that, I guess, there was a market. Not really a market per se, but you get what I mean by saying like there was a market there for children enjoying these tales, so they were softened a little bit. But I definitely would like to explore these a little bit more. There are a lot in here in this Barnes & Noble Classics edition. Okay, y'all, so there are a lot, and there are a couple that I'm not familiar with. Like I see some like Hansel and Gretel that I'm familiar with. Cinderella is in here. Little Red Riding Hood. I see The Wedding of Mrs. Fox. I think I've heard of that one. Briar Rose, Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin, The Golden Goose. So there are actually quite a few in here that I'm not familiar with at all. And maybe like this is something once again that I can kind of do over the course of the year, like read a story here, read a story there, and not try to finish this like in 1 month, because this is unrealistic to try to finish something this big in this month, and setting that unrealistic goal is just not, it's not good. So I think that maybe maintaining this in the sense of maybe if I just take a couple of stories a month and maybe just attempt to have it finished by the end of 2021, that would be a better goal for this one. The next one that I have here is Persuasion by Jane Austen. It's been a while since I've read Persuasion, and I'm actually holding this one up because I want to reread most of her works and try to finish up a bit of Jane Austen's books, because I have been sitting at the same three, which is Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Persuasion for the longest time. So I think that I would definitely need to get to those, but I'm interested in reading Persuasion again because it's one that I did enjoy. Like the three that I've read from her, I have enjoyed all three, although I think there's some questions there about Mansfield Park, which I have attempted a couple of times, and Mansfield Park to me is just so dry. So that's a discussion for another time. But Persuasion I did like, and it focuses on a woman by the name of Anne, which I believe Anne is her oldest protagonist in all of her completed works. I believe Anne is oldest, and she was betrothed to this man, and she was persuaded by someone else to break off the engagement. And this is prior to the contents of this specific novel. And we follow her as her family, I believe at this point, is close to financial ruin, and the same man pops back up again, and we kind of see whether they're going to spend the rest of their lives together, whether this is a situation that's going to work out or not. And my goodness gracious, y'all, like, to me it was just so infuriating that she was persuaded by this woman to give up her engagement because it was the woman said it was an unworthy match. And I'm like, girl, unworthy match? Like, now you got no money. And I mean, it was like 8 years later. So, you know, at that age in Regency England, you know, we're looking at someone who is an old maid. I mean, now of course, no, I mean, society has changed, but at her age she was becoming a spinster, and you know, she was just buying wooden nickels from this woman. But this is one that I did enjoy, and I do want to revisit. The next one that I have here is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This is one that I want to revisit because I have not finished the other stories in this. So I read The Metamorphosis, which is a very, very strange short story about a man who turns into a bug, seemingly turns into a bug. It is a acid trip of a book. It is such an acid trip of a book, but it was one that I did enjoy. But there are other short stories in here: The Judgment, The Stoker, and The Penal Colony, A Country Doctor, An Old Leaf, A Hunger Artist, and Josephine the Singer, or The Mouse People, and Before the Law. Those are other short stories of his that I have not read. And I want to technically finish this book because, like I said, I've only read the Metamorphosis out of it, and I do want to read the rest of the short stories that are included in it. Next on this list, I have a modern classic, which is Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I literally just talked about a book by Marquez, I think maybe like 2 videos ago, or maybe it was one, I don't know. It depends on when this goes up. That in my short book recommendations videos, I talk about his short story, Chronicle of a Death Foretold, which I thought was very, very interesting. I really, really enjoyed it. I like the writing. I like the message that he was putting out into the world with his short story. And I want to pick up one of his full-length novels, which the one that I own is Love in the Time of Cholera. And this one is about a man and a woman. The man declares his love for her, and then she ends up marrying someone else. And that, first of all, is super, super heartbreaking. But then he makes a decision that he is going to save his heart for her. So I believe he has something like, 622 affairs, but never falls in love with anybody. And he patiently waits until this woman's husband dies. He purposely attends the funeral and declares his love for her again. I don't know if this is gonna be a happy book, but that right there is, oh my God. Like, imagine someone waiting for you that long. Like, no matter what, I'm gonna wait for you because, listen, you deserve, I need to love you. Like, you are my one, you're my person. I hope this book is actually happy because I'm sitting here gushing, thinking about, oh my gosh, it's so romantic. I mean, not the 622 affairs, but the fact that literally he's like, I'm patiently waiting for you. I think it's so utterly romantic, but I have a feeling that this book is going to be so utterly sad. So we shall see, but I'm really, really excited to pick this one up. The next one that I have on my list is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and this is one that I have seen so many people read because I believe for some people this ends up being required reading. It never was required reading for me, but I know that this is such an important book, and from a lot of things that I've seen, it is compared to Greek tragedies, and it is the gateway for people from continental Africa having the gateway to start writing and telling stories about themselves and about their lives. And I don't know much about this one because even with the description on the back, there's not much except the fact that it's about a man who is quote unquote strong but deals with issues related to fear and anger. So I think this just may be chronicling the protagonist's life and experiences, but I've owned this one for quite a while. I haven't owned it as long as the other books that I was talking about in another video from 2014, but I've owned it for a couple of years and I just have not picked it up yet. So the next things that I have on this list are actually 2 books by Paulo Coelho, and that's the same author of The Alchemist. I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. So the first one that I have is The Pilgrimage, which I believe is actually non-fiction, and this has been described as the gateway to The Alchemist. This is about the pilgrimage that he makes on the road to Santiago, and it talks a little bit about finding your own journey and finding your own path. So I think that this one definitely inspired what he would later write in The Alchemist, this specific journey that he made. If you've read The Pilgrimage, let me know, but just from like what I've been reading on the back and some other things that I've been looking at, that this is a nonfiction book that would have later come to inspire The Alchemist, although I'm not sure which one was published first. It feels like The Alchemist was published first and this one came after, even though chronologically these events happen prior to the writing of The Alchemist, if that makes sense. And the next one that I have by him is The Witch of Portobello, and this one is about a woman by the name of Athena, and this book is told from the perspectives of others who quote unquote knew her. And the tagline for this one has been, how do you know, or how can you be true to yourself if you don't really know who you are? So I think that a lot of Paulo's books really make you dig deep in terms of thinking and how you perceive other people's experiences and how you perceive certain emotions. And I know that he is an iconic author because a lot of my friends who don't read, like they're not avid readers, rave about The Alchemist and how inspirational and important it is to their lives, which I find very interesting. Like, this is the one author that I have not read that it seems like everybody in my life that, like, they're non-readers, they have read something from him. So I'm looking to pick up these two, or I'm going to put this question out there to y'all. Do you feel like I should read The Alchemist first and then pick up these books, or does it really even matter at the end of the day? This cover though is absolutely, it's a beautiful cover. The next one that I have on this list is Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, which is one that I have been meaning to read for a very, very long time, and one that I have owned for a couple of years. And this is about essentially the life of Frederick Douglass. I think that a lot of people feel like this is one of the most important texts when we talk about slave narratives. If you did not know, Frederick Douglass was a slave, and he eventually taught himself to read and write. I believe he escaped slavery some point in the 1840s, and this was the first of 3 biographies that he would go to write, or autobiographies that he would go on to write. So I do want to pick this one up. It is small, but I'm sure that the length is going to not make this a quick read or anything like that. I think this is probably one of those books that, once again, I'm going to need to take my time with and really just dive into his personal story, because I know stuff about Frederick Douglass, but a lot of what I know is from a overall historical context, meaning that when we talk about history, specifically at the collegiate level, he would come up and, you know, we would discuss different things about Frederick Douglass. But I think knowing just the details about his life and his experiences are things that I think I don't know as much about, and I don't know as much as I think I should know in terms of what he has specifically done for the Black community, especially in terms of work and being an abolitionist. So one that, whew, yeah, probably gonna pack a punch, but I need to read it. And the last one that I have on this list is one that I haven't read twice before, but it's so good, y'all, and it's been a while since I've read it. And it's Like Water for Chocolate, a novel in monthly installments with recipes, romances, and home remedies by Laura Esquivel, and I'm probably saying that name wrong, but this is a book that is told from, I can't remember exactly who the narrator is, and I don't know if the narrator's ever identified. I went to go look to see, but I think it's just a narrator. But it's about her great aunt Tita, and Tita has a very, very unusual birth. I think that when she's born, her mother is chopping onions, and Tita has such an emotional reaction to it that she causes her mom to go into early labor, and she's born there in the kitchen. And it's a love story too, but it's such a sad love story because there is this tradition that the youngest daughter does not get married. She stays home and she takes care of her mother. So Tita is the youngest, and she falls in love with this man. And it's so heartbreaking because her mom refuses. Like, she's like, no, you're not going to marry him. And she lets Tita's older sister marry the man that she falls in love with. If you want to talk about screwed up, like, that's super, super, super screwed up. Super screwed up. So yeah, so she allows Tita's sister to marry the man that she falls in love with. And out of spite, I feel like it was out of spite, her mother then makes her make the wedding cake. And Tita cries as she's making this wedding cake. And there are some interesting things that happen as a result, and you find out that she has this emotional connection to food, and each chapter has a recipe attached to it. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but there's magical realism in this book. It is so good. It is so good. I really, really like it. The movie adaptation, definitely check it out. I think the first time I read this was in high school. I read it again when probably in my early 20s I read it again. So it's time for my third wave, my third read of this book, because yes, so much packed into this marvelous book. If you have not read Like Water for Chocolate, I don't know what you're doing. You need to read it. All right, y'all. So those are some classics, both old and modern classics, that I would like to read in 2021. There are more outside of this. Like I said before, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in my 2021 goals, where I do want to make sure that I'm exploring classics a little bit more. I do read classics. I know that it's like, oh, you read so much. I do read a little bit of everything, but I think this year I suffered so much in classics reading. I pick up any classics whatsoever. I think I probably will have one read by the end of the year because of A Christmas Carol for the Patreon group pick. But outside of that, I haven't read any classics this year, and it's quite disappointing. And also, like I was talking about before, I haven't read as much translated works, but as you can see from this pile, I picked some out just to kind of bring that goal forward. But that's something that I'll talk about in my 2021 goals. I'm not gonna talk about that now, but if there's any classics that you want to read in 2021, let me know in the comment box below. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. If you're interested in following me on social media, all of those links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video tomorrow.